Buenos.
Well, hello, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon if you're watching us from other place, as it's usually what we do. Sometimes we don't know when we are live or not. So, well, anyway, welcome you all to on this event, Rethinking Tomorrow. Everybody that is watching us on streaming, everybody that's watching us on Fundación Telefónica's channels, and everybody that have come along. So I'm going to make a very brief introduction of this dialogue in order to have time to have this dialogue. But I'm Pablo Gonzalo. I'm in charge of knowledge and digital culture of Fundación Telefónica. This event that we hold today is within the events of Rethinking Tomorrow that we started during the pandemic in order to chat, to discuss and to rethink the main things that we considered as key for the future that are being mixed not only with the pandemic but also with other social and political processes, and as societies we have the need of rethinking. We have talked about many issues, many topics, from economy to geopolitics, sociology or remote work, but today we are here to speak about one of the most important ones, because this is a lever for many other transformations, and this is education. In an event that we hold in collaboration with Dias Nórdicos and the Embassy from Denmark, and I would like to say thank you for this collaboration. And we are going to speak about the role that education has in order to promote democracy and active citizenship. This is something that is absolutely key in current times, and besides we are going to speak about democracy and active citizenship, as I've told you, according to one of the most important stimulating international examples, and this is the example and the tradition of the popular schools in Denmark. And we will have one of our guests speak about this. Let me introduce the three guests that we have here and the guest that we have online as quick as possible, because they have a very long resume and we want to take advantage of this hour that we have. But anyway, let me introduce them, and I would like to say thank you. We have Matt Philipson. Matt, thank you for coming.
Matt is profesor de
Matt is a teacher of a popular school in Denmark. I was going to ask you about how it was pronounced, but I didn't have time. It's Krogen Group Skole, maybe? It's a popular school. We have as a teacher here that, he will be able to pronounce his name. And besides, he is the manager of a program that we will speak about that is called Era Burning. It's about youth participation. He has a master's degree in sociology and education, and he has studies of international development. He has written articles in many books about democracy and about the role that teacher has to play in order to motivate students. This is something that is really key. We also have with us, following the line, we have Diego Rubio. Hello, Diego. Thank you. Thank you for coming along. Diego is the manager of the National Office of Prospects and Strategy of the country, and they are promoting the Plan Spain 2015 collaboration with more than 300 institutions all over the country, among which we have the satisfaction of contributing our part, and it's a plan that they're working in order to include the long-term thinking and long-term strategy in the government action. Diego has a degree in history by the Universidad Autónoma in Barcelona. We are going to speak about the future with two historiographers, and he has studied in the Columbia University, in Oxford University, and the Sorbonne University, and among other things he has been a teacher of applied history and government at the Yale University, where he created the Center for the Governance of Change. Thank you very much, Diego. we have Mr. Daniel Sierra. Hello, Daniel. Hello. Thank you very much for inviting us. Thanks for being with us today. He's the secretary and spokesperson of the political incidents area of CANAE, that is the State Confederation of Students Associations. As I was telling you, he is a student. I think that you are still a student. You're still a student of history at the University of Oviedo, and within his tasks in the association world, he represents CANAE in the permanent commission and the plenary commission of the school commission of the national level. Thank you very much, Daniel. And last but not least, we have Marta Postigo, who is connected from Malaga. Hello, Marta. Can you hear us? We can't hear you. I don't know if you can hear us. Yeah. Good morning. Yeah, that's it. Perfect. How are you? Thank you very much for being with us. Marta is professor of moral philosophy at the University of Malaga. She is a researcher focused on cosmopolis, education for democratic citizenship. This is one of the main topics that we're going to tackle, and the European Union. She has made researches at different international centers like the Center for the Study of Democracy, the New School for Social Research, or the Finnish Center for Excellence in Political Thought and Conceptual Change. And among her publications, I would like to highlight one that I think that is very interesting. And this is Ethical Philosophy and Education in Spain, the Challenge of Humanities in a Technified and Globalized World, among many others. Thank you very much, Marta. And well, after making the introductions, let's get to the nitty-gritty. I would like you to make a brief introduction of 5, 6, 7 minutes in order to give your point of view about what brings us together here, and the rest of the time maybe we can have this dialogue. So I would like to get started by Mads. Okay, and about this example and this inspiration that we're going to speak about today, and these are the popular schools in Denmark. I would like you to tell us a little bit about your experience, your point of view of this role, or how we should focus on this need of civic and democratic participation of young people, but also from that history and that tradition of these schools that maybe, well, many people here in Spain don't know about these schools.
Thank you for the invitation, both to the Danish Embassy from the invitation from Fundación Telefónica. Thank you to Dias Nórdicos también for thinking of the Danish folk high schools and finding us relevant to include in this dialogue and discussion about active citizenship. And it's big questions, and it could take a long time to explain the whole history of the Danish folk high schools. And we are very, very different as schools. There are 60 different Danish folk high schools in Denmark. But I will try to talk about what unites us and what are the basic principles of the movement that we are part of. And I think it's important to say, first of all, on a practical level, we are 60 different schools. We educate around 10,000 students each year in Denmark. And then we have this special thing where it's non-formal education, and the students live at the school for half a year. They live in rooms 2 and 2, and they eat breakfast together, they take classes together, they dance together, they party together, they learn together. So they're at the school all the time. And also a part of the staff and the management live at the school. So we're more like a small society in these schools, where we also, of course, try to interact with the society around us. When they go to class, they don't get any grades and they don't have any exams, so we don't monitor their skills in that way. We have informal evaluation where we talk to the students on whether they find the thing we present them for interesting and if it's relevant for them, but we don't monitor them in a formal way like you do in the formal education system. Then we meet every morning for morning assemblies because we find it important that everybody is there and that we meet and have something in common besides what they are there to study. So we meet to sing, and we sing a lot of songs in the morning at the morning assemblies. Then they have a short lecture at 5 or 10 minutes from either a student or from someone from the staff, where they tell about something they find interesting in society in general. Yeah. And these schools, I think what unite us is that we have this focus on the school of life, and that's founded in an idea of a Danish priest called Grundtvig, who founded this movement. He didn't start any folk high school himself, but he started the idea of having a folk high school because he wanted to create a school where you could look at society and see that the world and being a human being in the world is a chaotic and wild process. And what the formal school system did back at that time was to put it into boxes and to analyze it with a positivistic view on the world, that you can actually map the world and tell the truth about the world. And he said, no, we can't. We need to have schools where you can also just ask questions and ask questions to each other. So what he did and what he wanted was to have a place where especially farmers in the beginning could go and they could learn how to be human beings in a chaotic world and also being citizens in a society, because we were on the verge of having democracy at this point in Denmark. And he thought that if the people of Denmark were to take part of taking power of the society and create a new society in the future, then they also needed to know about each other and their own lives, and not only the thing that was taught in university that was kind of like an aristocratic elite way. So he wanted normal people to meet with each other from all over the country with different political views, live together, discuss with each other, and learn about life in that way. And that's also why the role of the teacher is a kind of a special role in these schools, because almost none of the teachers are educated teachers. We come with different professions. It can be actors, it can be directors, it can be musicians, it can be, in my case, political activism as a practice. So I wasn't hired at the school because I haven't, because I'm a teacher, because I'm not. I'm only a teacher because I'm hired at the folk high school. I'm not an educated teacher, but I've been engaged in political activism for many years. So the schools, the 60 schools are very different. Some focus on religion, some focus on music, some focus on arts. And our school is a bit different from the others because we have an explicit focus on democracy. And that's because when we were founded back in 1946 by a famous Danish thinker in a Danish context called Hal Koch, he wrote a book called What is Democracy? And at this point, he looked out on the world, and I think a lot of people in Europe did in 1946, just after the Second World War, and analyzed what went wrong. And his perspective was that part of what went wrong was that we started to see each other only as mere representations of ideology. And when you do that, it's way easier just to go to war against each other. It's easier to kill each other in the trenches because you only see each other as representations of ideology. And we forgot that what we're actually fighting is real human beings. So he said we need to have a place where you can take people again from all across the country and maybe even all over the world, put them together with different political views, and again, make them learn together, dance together, and clean together at the school, so they get a sense of, hey, I'm in this society with other persons, with other worldviews, and we can disagree on a lot of level, and we can have political arguments, but I know when I enter a political argument with you, you're also a human being that I can care about when we exit this political discussion. So, yeah, he had a way of saying, and I think that's really important for how we do at our school today. He said that democracy is a way of life. It's not only a political system. And really, I think this sentence is so relevant when you look at countries like Poland or Hungary or the United States, where you can say you have a formal democratic system in these, maybe you can discuss it, whether it's true in Hungary right now and in Poland, but at least you have this formal structure of democracy. But if you don't see democracy as a way of life, where the citizens actually practice democracy in everyday life and seek to understand each other, then you don't have a true democracy. So that's what we're trying to do in our school. We're trying to make to engage the young people in democratic practices in their local life at the school, but also engage them in global society and the problems that they face in global society.
Ujú. Es impresionante.
Well, it's impressive. We were talking about this before. It's impressive to read the statements of the founders of these schools in 1830, because they are totally updated, and they said, among other things, that they were criticizing the current education system. It seems that this happens throughout history, and it's good because this is the way to improve it. And they said, we only teach dead knowledge and nothing about real life. And they said, in order for democracy to work, it was key that citizens had knowledge about the world, the society they lived in, the fact of living together and respecting other ideas and thoughts. This was said around 1830. So, well, I would like to move on to Diego. I would like him to speak a little bit about all these things. You've just organized one of the many dialogues that you are organizing in the framework of Spain 2050, compulsory education. You have organized this in Salamanca Monday and Tuesday. So, besides everything you've done with the plan, it's really fresh. So, we would like to know what you think about education, about the involvement of students in all these civic and democratic values, and how we should move on. Well, I have the feeling that when we want to include a value in education, we make it into a subject, and maybe that's not the point. Maybe it should be a little bit more transversal, as Mats was saying. Just tell us about it, Diego. Well, as you know, the concept of civic participation has many shapes. In the end, it's a tag that we use to speak about many different aspects. And it's important, if we want to have an approximate image of where Spain is in this civic behavior and how education is helping us build it, we should break it down in some way. What data are telling us is that Spain is very good in some fields. We are making a very good job in some fields, and we are doing a bad job in other fields, like many countries. For example, in terms of values, we are very good. The last PISA report tells us that Spain is one of the best countries when conveying to its students that what the OCDE calls global skills, that are knowledges and necessary attitudes to understand and develop different sensitivities, such as tolerance to diversity, respect to the gender equality idea, and the interest on great challenges and global challenges like climate change, for example. And I think that's true, because many rankings in the world say that Spain is one of the best 10 countries to live when you're a woman or when you are a foreigner, or one of the best 10 countries that has more respect to diversity in religion, sexual orientation, you name it. So we are doing a very good job there. In other topics, we are not doing a sort of very good job. On an average, I would say. For example, the most representative one is the fact of election participation. This is one of the elements that is usually analyzed in order to assess the civic participation. In Spain, in the national election, we have around 60 and 70% of people voting. This places us below countries like Sweden, for example, and more or less at the same level as Finland, for example, and a little bit better than the European average. If we look at other aspects, like, for example, the participation on European elections, we are much better than the vast majority of these countries, because in 2019 in Spain, 60% of the people voted, and the average at the EU is 50%. So there's a fix there. So I would highlight two things where we're not doing a very good job. For example, the acknowledgement and respect to the democratic institutions. In Spain, 78% of population wants democracy, considers that democracy is the best government system that exists. This is a very high percentage in the European Union. But we have the problem that almost the same percentage, or even more Spaniards, say that they do not trust the government, the parliament, the judicial system. I mean, the foundations of this democratic system. And this is an important challenge that we have ahead of us, because we know that without trust on these institutions, it is very difficult to build all the rest. Where does this mistrust come from? By the way, there's another topic where we are not doing a very good job, and this is civic participation, for example, in associations. In Spain, 35% of population says that they are participating in some kind of association. It is a very low percentage if we compare it to northern countries, Scandinavian countries, for example, where the percentage is 70%. And maybe we're doing something wrong, because Spain had a percentage of 70 at the beginning of the 90s. So we've made society go back in this topic, in this field. Why am I tackling all this stuff? The lack of knowledge and the lack of trust, in public institutions has to do with the fact that public institutions make mistakes and they do not fulfill their goals as well as they should. But I think that this is a matter of lack of knowledge on these institutions and on the most international reality, because the truth is that the most important study in democratic quality by the University of Gothenburg, very far away from Madrid, tells us, on the last report in 2020, it tells us that Spain is the 9th most consolidated democracy in the world, much better than countries as France, Canada, or United States. The research that have to do with civil rights and the rule of law says that Spain is doing a better job than France or the US. I mean, Spain, in order to be a young democracy, has made a great progress during the last 30 or 40 years, and maybe we're making mistakes when explaining it to the young people. Almost done. We know that education is key for this, that we have empirical evidences, and in the last years we've had Campbell and Hopkins, Weinberg studies that put information on the table to prove that the education system is key to convey and reinforce the civic participation. And we are doing this through two ways, as you were saying at the beginning. One way is to create a specific subject with contents on this topic, and in Spain, the President Zapatero did so in 2006, following a European recommendation. In 2012, if I'm not mistaken, this subject was removed, and the government has created another subject to educate people on citizenship. There's another way that I think it's equally important, and this is what you were saying, I think. This is to include these civic knowledges in every single subject that is part of the core of the curriculum. I mean, I think that philosophy and history, that are two subjects that many people studied during their primary and secondary education, are two privileged vehicles to convey the acknowledgement and the knowledge about democracy, the need of collaborating between individuals, etc. And I think that Spain is making progress in these fields, but we shouldn't say that we are doing a bad job, because in many things we are on the average, and in many other things we are better than other countries.
Yes, and it's important to work with the data, because in Spain we tend to see ourselves in a worse light than we should, and it's important to see that in some aspects we are ahead of the rest, and we need to improve whatever it needs to be improved. And one of the aspects that you've mentioned that we are doing worse, and I think it's very important to recall this because we're going backwards, is in terms of the people being part of associations. And I would like to connect this with Daniel, so that he tells us about his experience and his vision in this sense, because how I would like to know from the viewpoint of the students, because you are some of the voices that we need to listen to in the field of education, and maybe we tend to listen to the least, you're working from the students' viewpoint and from the associations of students, and you're working on improving this trend to being part of associations. So would you like to share with us what you're doing from your association? Well, first of all, I would like to thank the organization to let us be part of this and to listen to the opinion of the students, because, as you mentioned, we are not listened to very often, and it's true that we are participating more and more, and we have been invited to participate in Agenda 2050 from the government of the country. And however, we need to highlight that this is not the general trend. We participate in entities in a very discreet manner. Sometimes we give speeches of how people can participate actively in associations, and some people aren't even aware that they have the right to create a student associations, because many times parents know that they can be part of the parents' associations related to schools, but many students are not aware of their right to do the same thing. When it comes to creating an association, you get to the registries of your region, and they give you a lot of troubles because you're missing some papers or documents or whatever. And I was even told once, what was this story of students creating associations? What was all this about? And this is part of the problem why students do not have a bigger representation. I think this is a problem because people who belong to associations, sometimes it happens because we've been lucky enough to have attended one of these chats or dialogues where we learn about this. Or, for instance, in my case, I created this association when I was finishing my secondary school, and this is another problem. Normally, association at secondary education level starts in the latest courses of this part of the education, because this is a problem because many students do not see the purpose of it all. They don't feel heard or listened to. And the school council, we only have one or two representatives where teachers have more of half the council is made up of teachers, and the students' proposals are usually never listened to. And some of us don't even know what the school council is about. We are not told about the real functions of the school council. They don't tell us what a delegate is. They tell us that we need to choose a delegate in each classroom, but sometimes we see that those delegates are not backed up by the students, and some of the students who would be more interested in really doing things are not elected by their peers. Sometimes the assemblies are not even called, and we think that this is a main pillar of what education needs to be. Education needs to let us know what participation means, starting from our school and then also in society. We all go through schools, we all go to secondary school. Some parts are optional, but we all need to go to the first years in secondary school, and this should be our first democratic school, because at the end of the day, a state council, a school council needs to work as a state council or as the parliament, so that people can bring their proposals to be discussed and then approved or rejected. And also, as my colleague was saying, many Spanish people do not trust political institutions. I see this from my perspective. I see this happening in university right now. There is an election going on, and many people do not know how these work. And when we hear some news about a law being passed in the parliament or a decree has been passed, many people really do not understand what they're talking about. Many people do not understand the processes that a bill needs to pass to be approved. And in the newspapers, they even mix up the European Parliament with the different institutions that make up the European Union, and this is usually related to the quality of our democracy. We do not know what we are voting. We do not know what the representatives do for us. And as Matt said, we need to understand that democracy is more than the democratic institutions that are elected every 4 years. We need to understand democracy as something wider and where we can participate on a day-to-day basis. Thank you very much, Daniel. I think you have raised many topics for the debate, but I would like to move on and leave the mic to Marta Postigo, who is with us online. Sergio has spoken about values and things that you work on. Marta, what do you think the role of citizenship participation is right now? Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank the Danish Embassy and Fundación Telefónica and Sara Maria Bogantes, who was the person who contacted me to invite me to this dialogue. I would have loved to be in Madrid with you, but unfortunately, I have lessons this afternoon at 3:30, and it was impossible for me to join you in person. I hope that you can hear me well, and that despite the distance, we can interact properly. Following what my colleagues have been saying, I have been focused in the past years in the debate in Spain about education, and in particular about humanities within education, in particular philosophy and ethics. As one of the participants has said, we have seen that the role of philosophy and in ethics in education has been decreased over the years, and now it's almost optional. From the institutions, from the academia, especially focused in humanities, we have highlighted the importance of philosophy in education. With regards to this, I would like to stress something that has been mentioned before, which is the importance of an education aimed at democracy, which is not only technical or instrumental, but because, of course, all technical knowledges such as mathematics or physics or chemistry and the rest of all fields and knowledges are very important and are essential to knowledge and the education that students need to receive. But there are other aspects that are also important, such as being educated to live in the liberal, open, democratic societies and the global world that we will live in, where there are new challenges appearing all the time, and we have some uncertainties, and we need students who can tackle the challenges of the future. This is also connected with a wider knowledge, broader knowledge, and not only related to technical or instrumental topics. This is why it's so important to educate citizens in these aspects so that they are able to live in plural, diverse, democratic societies. And this is a debate that has been going on for several decades already. In our case, we live within the European Union, and as it has been said here before, this means to be educated not only to live within our societies, but also to live within the European Union, to understand what the integration process is in the European Union, to understand the institutions in the European Union, and also the democratic institutions that have been created, and understand what it means to be a citizen within those states, to be a citizen in the European Union and in the world at the end of the day. In Spain, this has created a very broad debate because it has been said topics such as education for citizenship or ethics have been basically removed from the students' program. And although there is a new education law that all always mentioned that education was aimed at living in a democracy and with certain democratic values. The truth is that although the law may mention all these values, the topics, the subjects that were taught in school had been deleted, in fact, from the curriculum. Some of them have been reinstated, but philosophy is not even an optional subject in secondary education. Ethics was only an alternative subject to religion. We never understood that religion, ethics could, in terms of teaching how to live in a democracy and how to give critical thinking education to children, could be something optional and an alternative to religion learning. And there has been some improvement, but not even this new law really provides philosophy education for the students that would enable them to go further and go deeper into the philosophy subject that is taught in the secondary education. So we are limiting the education on critical thinking, on philosophical reflection, knowledge of the civic values with which we live. And the importance of all these values is being reduced. So the big question would be that if, in order to educate future citizens in democratic values and the living together in this global world and knowing what the European Union, we really need one single subject, or if we need some cross boundaries, cross subject teaching, so that we can include all these values in a more transversal manner. So we wonder if we need to create certain specific subjects to teach about democratic institutions and what the state of law is and other ethical values applied to our world, in our technological world or technified world, if this needs to be just one single subject, or if we should have this as a cross-sectional type of learning or teaching. I hope I could convey the state of the current state of education, and I would like us to discuss this further, and some of these aspects being central to education in the 21st century. Thank you, Marta. Yes, we actually have some time for everyone to intervene, although I think that we're going to wrap up this round and maybe we'll allow for some questions to be asked from the audience. Since we're talking about democratic values and participation and action, I would like to ask you to focus the second part of our conversation in topics that are more specific. We could maybe discuss about specific levers that we can touch on to improve these aspects, best practices, or elements that you think that we should improve or that we should modify in a very specific manner, if you think there are any. And I would like to start with you, Matt, because you were talking about the philosophy behind the Danish schools. You made me think of one of the projects very differently. They're very different, but we have a project going on which is Campus 42, is a programming campus. It's not a school devoted to an integral development. It's focused on programming and in particular, but through that we develop different values that are part of the human beings and that are very much related to what you were talking about. It's a school where we don't have any examinations. The teachers are more guides than teachers. They learn between peers, and also the students are committed with their own educational project. Obviously, there are many other initiatives, but what you were saying reminded me of this initiative that we are pushing. And one of the initiatives that you're pushing is Europe Burning, that I would like you to tell us about as a specific project. And as we say in Spain, we can put a face on it, and that you're pushing to improve in a real manner this political participation and the democratic values. And maybe then we can move on to our other speakers.
I'll try to do that. I think that what you're saying, Daniel, is really, really important. And if you want to have democratic citizens, then you need to create forums where you actually can be involved and where you're listened to in a real manner. And we try to do that in the school in a general by having common meetings where we have the staff and the students together discussing how are things going at the school. Do we want anything to change? And these meetings are arranged by the students, where we have a council consisting of 8 students and 2 teachers, and then they conduct all the meetings. They take the notes. They decide which subject we should decide on or discuss at these common meetings, and then we all have a say. And then if we can't agree, then we vote in the end, and everybody has one vote, staff and students together. And I think this is really important, that they get the feeling that they can actually decide on their own life when they're at the school, and they have a say in their everyday life. The other thing is what we're doing in the programs at the school, and I think one of the when I have students that come from high schools, they are really, really skilled, and they're really, really qualified. If you measure it, they would know a lot of things about what's going on in the world, and they also know a lot of things about democracy. But what they learn in high school is to hold the world out here. And they learn to analyze it and look at it and be objective and see at it like this. What we want to do in our school is to pull the world closer to them. So when they learn about active citizenship, it's not enough that they read about them in books. We go and meet activists, we go and meet experts, we go and meet journalists. When I teach them about what's going on in Hungary, for an example, I both teach them about the critical stuff in all the laws that are being made in Hungary right now, but we also go to visit the Hungarian ambassador to hear what are your logics. Why do you do what you do in Hungary? When we learn about global production and why and how the Danish youth, because the Danish youth live a quite privileged life. A lot of them are entangled in a global world, but they don't really realize it, because we have put all of the problems related to our society in other parts of the world. So for an example, what they consume and what they use in everyday life, they cannot see the consequences of this because it's far away out in the world. So we made this program, Europe is Burning, where we go on a political road trip, as we call it, through Europe. We go to Paris to talk with the Yellow Vest, but also representatives from Macron's party, En Marche. We go to Spain to go to Almeria to visit the greenhouses where the vegetables for the consumers in the northern parts of Europe are produced. To talk with the migrant workers there, how are their working conditions? Also the bosses at the greenhouses and environmental activists, to get a perspective on how does the situation look in Almeria. We also go to Barcelona to talk with the independence activists and also people from conservative parties, for example, arguing against independence. So we want to pull the world closer to the students. Early on, we used to say, if you don't engage in creating a better society, nobody will. I think today, when you look at Europe, the sentence must be different. It's what we tell the students now is that if you don't engage in changing society, others will. And that's what I want to do, either inspire them by meeting cool activists trying to create another future, or to provoke them by letting them meet somebody that they disagree a lot with, and then thinking, okay, I don't want these people to decide the future of Europe, then I have to be active myself, because otherwise these will get the last word in how Europe should look like. So I think, Marta, what you're also saying, I think it's really important what type of classes you teach, but I also think the methods are really, really important, that democracy is something you learn by practicing it and engaging with other people. You cannot only read about it in books or talk about it in classes.
Absolutamente. O sea, sí.
Absolutely. I fully agree with what Mads is pointing out. I think there's a consensus, a global consensus in the educational field that children at school need to learn by learning. So at the end of the day, what you need to do is to put into practice the skills and the competences that you want to develop. This is the only way to develop them. This applies to mathematics and to sciences, but also to anything related to citizenship, participation. We need to create in our schools some spaces where students are empowered, where students can get organized and they can participate in making decisions within the school so that their voices are heard and listened to, and to see that sometimes their voices translate into real actions. In the case of Spain, this entails a big mentality change within the centers, and it also needs a greater autonomy for the centers. The schools have a very limited capacity for acting than other schools within the OECD environment. So anything related to creating this participation space for youngsters is important. Democracy is not something that we can conquer and just go to bed. Democracy is a way of living, and it requires constant and daily participation. It's not about voting a better or worse shepherd. It's about us stop being just sheep, and that we participate more in the public life. And all this is true when it comes to promoting the participation among the citizens. But I think that it's also dangerous to develop a vision that we have also a problem with the values, because this is going on about the idea that the new generations are not so involved and they like values. The surveys that we are carrying out at the moment tell us that the youngsters that have been brought up in this new education systems have values that are even, let's say, higher than their parents' values. They're more European than their parents. They believe more in democracy. They believe more in equality between men and women. Their gender roles have been more incorporated by them all, and they're more able to work within a democratic system. And we have been able to absorb a greater number of foreign students in our centers than other countries in the European Union. So it's not only about the contents in one subject or the other, but because children see a lot of diversity in their classrooms, and this contributes a lot. Sometimes there's a 12 or 15% of students in the classroom coming from other countries and even different continents. So we have this riches already integrated in our system. So I don't think we should buy the narrative that education is not really conveying the right values to the youth. This is not true. First of all, because the youth already has these values, and so education cannot be doing so poorly. And also because our educational, the surveys tell us that our educational system are quite strong. Is quite strong in this sense, and I don't think we should have any complex in this sense. I fully agree with what you say about the values of my generation. I think that very often, from the adult vision, we are seen as just children.
Se nos trata muchas veces.
Sometimes they are too paternalist with us. We don't like that. For example, you get to some meetings. No, it's not the case that much, but they used to say, oh, look at these children, that's good, they're doing things, and that's it. And sometimes, because of the fact of being younger, sometimes we are underaged. Sometimes it's like our opinion is not as important as what someone in his 50 or 60 could say. And I think that this is a change in mindset that we should have, because it's very good to have these space for participation, and it's an effective participation. I mean, we should take into account what's really happening with this new generation and the voice that we have. Yeah, if you allow me just one remark, for the people that are a little bit skeptic, when I say that we have to empower young people to make them decide, and I'm speaking about 10 and 12-year-old people, I invite them. Well, Monday and Tuesday we were in Salamanca. We had a citizens workshop with students between 8 and 18 years old, where we asked them to explain how they would improve the education system. I encourage people to listen to that video because they'll see that the reflections are incredibly accurate and very mature. And children don't ask to have an A grade, they don't want to go to class. They're asking for very sensible things that are in line with what many experts in pedagogy believe that we have to do, obviously with other words. But to me, that's the evidence that we have to empower young people, because they will help us improve the system and will convey that civic participation values that we need. Absolutely. Sometimes we have the feeling that what we're going to ask is for them to give away an A mark, and that's it. We don't want silly things. I mean, you understand me. Yeah. Maybe, as you said before, Danielle, the way, so to speak, the path. We should work step by step to making this participation into something more normal, with these workshops, with initiatives as the one that Mats has explained, or with the movement that you have, and these paths should be more standard. And we shouldn't see cases like, for example, you come to a meeting and they say, well, let's see what these young people are going to say. I don't know, Marta, what do you think about this? And we could move on. Yeah, I would like to insist on one fact, and the democratic values. I mean, we're not born with that. And that's why we have to learn them, as we have to learn other knowledge and other skills, because we are not born being democratic, but this is part of a learning process. And maybe there are people that are lucky and maybe they learned this from the local community or home or the private sphere, but school is there to offset this deficit. The school has to offset the other ways of education that where they are not conveying either democratic or civic values. They have to promote that cosmopolitanism value and that spirit. This is what we aspire to, as Martha Nussbaum said, a Socratic and self-reflective education. If we are used to see the foreigners as a threatening people, so to speak, with chauvinist values and sectary values, etc. Well, school's there to offset those values and to help these people learn, how to live in a democratic environment. And we are not born with those skills. We need to learn how to live in a democracy, in plural societies, and school's there to teach that. So, school has a key role to play to educate in citizenship, in an open citizenship value, etc. I don't know if we go through the secondary education or the mandatory stage, if we are not able to learn how to debate, or if we don't know what's the rule of law, what are the main institution and democratic processes, if we are not able to discuss and practice discussion with other students about ethical or controversial aspects, maybe we do not acquire these skills. We learn by discussing or debating. If we are not taught to do that, to listen to other opinions, to defend our opinions with arguments in a rational way, maybe we won't mature with these democratic skills. And I think that this should be taken into account. It's true that maybe we're not that bad. The last PISA report, in the case of Spain, in terms of values, tolerance, citizenship, in the case of Spain, we have quite good marks. and we are doing a good job compared to other deficits we have, language, maths. But I think we need to keep on doing. Populisms are emerging and are moving on. The excluding speeches are emerging. Nationalism is a great challenge, and if we do not offset those excluding and nationalist values, racist values or sexist values in education, and we trust on the fact that this will be solved in the private sphere, I think that we are not doing a good job. Eventually, in the media, civil society, etc., schools, and public education in general, where it is important. Well, it is important to teach the future students and citizens that they live in a world where we have different races, different cultures, but at the same time, they need to know what are the democratic institutions, the rule of law, to fight against segregation and exclusion, speeches and statements, and we can't just trust on the fact that this is going to be done on the private sphere. Or maybe we think that it's enough to teach the scientific and technological skills, the instrumental knowledge, so that they are good professionals in their sphere, the classical technique, but they have to learn how to be citizens in a more globalized world, and they will face great challenges from a technology point of view, from a global point of view, civic point of view, or political point of view, and they will have to face them with a critical spirit. Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that any person that has been in a classroom today in Spain and has seen our teachers work will see that teachers are totally aware of this role, and they are putting that into practice every single day. The information that we have are not created from scratch. I mean, we have families, society, and education, and Martha has pointed at something that I would like to highlight, and I totally agree with that, especially the pending subject that we have beyond the civic participation when we were speaking about civic values. I think that the most important subject that's still pending in Spain and where education can play a key role is to correct the inequalities behind the statistics that we are giving. Because yes, 80% of Spaniards believe on democracy, but it's true that, well, it's very interesting to see the social and economic biases that we have behind 20% of the people that don't believe in democracy. And we need to make an extra effort for our education system to act as a corrective catalyst of these inequalities. In some fields, they are breaking our society. Yeah, Mats?
But I think it's also interesting that if 80% of the Spanish population think that democracy is a good thing and know a lot about democracy, it's also talking about active citizenship. What do we actually mean by democracy, or what do we mean by active citizenship? Because sometimes you can see representations or people actually taking part in society where you disagree politically, but you should still embrace that they're doing it. For an example, and I know this can be controversial to talk about, and I don't want to judge who is right and who is wrong, but 2 years ago I was in Catalonia and Barcelona, and I saw 400,000 people going to the street with a population the size of Denmark. And if I saw 400,000 people in Denmark going to the street, whatever the matter would be, I would think that there was some kind of sign of active citizenship. And that's, I think, is a dilemma when talking about education, that we should actually educate people where we need to know that what they're going to use this for could be something that we would disagree with. So I'm educating students to take part in society, and when they do it afterwards, they might be active in political organizations that I totally disagree with on a personal level. So that's the controversial part of talking about democracy and active citizenship. It's easy when we talk about things that we agree on, but when the students actually go out there and act in a way that we don't think is the right way to act, or the right way to think about society, we need to set them free somehow. And another point is, I think it's very important, this discussion, whether it's adults, whether it's children also taking part in a school society. What I see in the Danish youth also, I know I said a lot of them are privileged, but they also have this urge to act on a thing they see in television. They know that something's wrong in the world right now. They see it all the time. And some of the things that are making them really feel bad is that they don't know how to act on it, because they know what's going on in Yemen, they know what's going on in China, they know what's going on with the climate, they hear about racism in their own society, they hear so many different problems, but they don't have a way of acting on it. So I think that's a responsibility of the educational system as well, to learn young people where can they go if they want to act on the problems that they see in society. Some of them know, but some of them need guidance to see. You can be active in political movements on the streets, you can become a member of a political party, you can vote, you can be part of other organizations, but to show them where to go if they want to act on their political beliefs.
Totalmente. El reto aquí está en todos.
Yeah, the challenge here is that we all agree on the goal. The challenge is to identify the reason, because sometimes, it comes to my mind the most important civic movement that we've seen. For example, in the last years, this Greta Thunberg and young people of Fridays for Future. And it depends how you interpret it. You can interpret this as, well, it's just a great movement of environmental. It's a great environmental movement that has appeared. Besides from school, I mean, people that didn't go to school to demonstrate, and maybe you could think that maybe the school didn't know how to channel that frustration. But on the other hand, necessarily people that go to a demonstration are people that are at school, that have learned how urgent climate change is and the need that they have to participate in the discussion at school. So it would be unfair to assume that schools are not fulfilling its roles, but of course we always have to do more. The idea of progress is, and that's the idea, to not to be satisfied with what we have and to ask for more. Yeah, absolutely. And this is getting more and more interesting, but we have run out of time. And the truth is that, well, I would like to say thank you all. It has been really exciting. And I take this idea that Mads was telling before, to get the world closer to school, and it has to do with what you were saying, to get the world closer to school and the other way around. This is what the point is about. The things that you're going to find in the world should be at school, and you should practice them at school, and you should learn them, but you should practice them, you should live them, and you should execute them, so to speak, at school. Maybe this is one of the keys. I don't know if there's any question here in the audience. Yeah, we're going to finish with this question, and we'll wrap up with this. Yeah, are things working? Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for the speech. I think that we have a lack of role models. I've been at school, at the university, etc., and I've spent many hours there, and I feel, well, as Danielle was saying, or as you were all saying, you ask the students whether they know how to identify things to improve the education system. Well, I chat to some friends or acquaintances, and people know how to identify things that you say, well, this is clearly something that has room for improvement, because you spent many hours and many years here, and I don't know, maybe in 1 hour that you are talking to someone that conveys a concern, maybe that has contributed much more than, I don't know, that a very long time that you have been. Let me explain myself. I mean, we have a lack of stimuli at school. I mean, you are not able to make yourself curious about. Well, I'm getting into a loop. Sorry. Yeah, you're explaining very well. You know more about this, Danny, but. for example, we have a lack of channels at the universities, at schools, etc. Maybe the public authorities need to open more visible and accessible channels. It's true that institutions listen. The Ministry of Education is listening constantly. They meet with many stakeholders. We have met with more than 300 institutions to see the long-term national strategy that we are designing, and among them many students' associations. But you're right. When you get to the first course of your degree, is that the coolest guy or girl at this degree maybe is someone that has been really involved in this and has participated and has fought for the students' interest. The perception, I mean, the fact that this is something for weirdos or for boring people and for people that want to be a politician, but it shouldn't be interesting for the rest of the people, and that shouldn't be the case. Yeah, so, sorry, I had got stuck. At school, for example, I've never thought about going to a students' association, and I've never listened to anybody talk about that. That's the first point. And we had a representative at the university, and we didn't know what he was doing. And maybe he was not the person that was conveying better values, I would say. And it was like, I want to be this, and I want to be that, just to have this on my curriculum. So that's on the one hand. And as I was saying, or what you were saying before, in school, I mean, it shouldn't be the case that you have a private role model that makes you aware of all this. School should play a key role. You spend many time and many years there, and it should be there where they promoted these values so that everybody could access this knowledge. And to make people aware of all this, make people curious. And I think the role models are important. As Matt was saying, you're burning. I think that's amazing. And sometimes young people, what you were saying about young people's values, well, I chat with young people, I go on the bus, I see how young people behave, and I see that they have very positive values, but that is, I think, it is more difficult to identify how to act or how to improve things in order to participate actively. So platforms like the one that you've mentioned before, You're Burning, well, I've suddenly come across it, but it's not something that if you're not interested on that. I mean, it's not easily accessible. I don't know if, Danielle? Or, Marta, Danielle? Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, thank you very much. According to what you've said, I think it's important to make a distinction between education and values, so to speak, because this has been tackled several times here. And what we have been defending from the academic field is about learning how to think of the critical thinking. One thing is to assume specific values, and well, it's very good, and you can be very kind, to have very good intentions, and to be acritical and non-reflective in a non-reflective way. And a different thing is that they teach you how to think, that they stimulate since you are a kid, as many people do in other schools. For instance, primary school, they promote critical thinking and discussion among children, and a different thing is to stimulate philosophy, the history of critical thinking, capacity to learn, to debate, to discuss, and to reflect on values. Not to assume specific values that are already given, but to think about the values, to discuss about them, to analyze and to consider them critically. And for that, philosophy and ethics are important. These are the subjects that have been, first of all, well, they have been facing ethical thought, and they have discussed social and moral problems and ethical problems. And philosophy, well, we can see how this philosophy disappears in secondary school. Not even the the reform that is in force includes philosophy in secondary obligations. So if we remove philosophy, if we remove ethical thinking, we can have values. But it's not about assuming the ecology and environmental values. It's about learning how to think what human beings are, how we've lived on Earth, what future we want in this planet. And we should wonder about these things in a critical and philosophical way. We need to prepare young people to think, people that should be ready to think, to give arguments. And I think that the most stimulant thing for young people, for students and for adults, is to be able to think, to give arguments, to reflect. And it's true that maybe this is not very well promoted at schools or other fields where we are taught knowledges that we have to learn by heart and that's it. But to learn how to discuss, to debate, to think, I think it's important. And I think this is what's being tackled, how to stimulate education and critical thinking, the capacity to give arguments, to discuss. And we need to be able to convey that to political life and to ethical life as adults. I would like to point out something. Sometimes it's not about creating new spaces for participation, but to put into value the ones that exist. For example, the school council at secondary schools. Students have always room there. And you see when there's election to the council, for example, in my case, there was one person running for it. Next year there were 2 people running for it. So maybe we should show students what the council is useful for, what they do at meetings, because it's a way to make them feel more interested. And if they see that the council is really useful, maybe at the next election, instead of having 2 people, we would have 15. So the last remark by Mats.
It's kind of like an internal matter but I can recognize the discussion from Denmark and how the student movement in Denmark function. And I think what's important is maybe it's responsible to also include the perspectives of the students even more. But it's also important to say, if you're not given a space, then you need to take a space. And I think that's what the student unions also can do. They can go out and claim a space at the universities or at the schools they're in, and also make future workshops or utopia workshops where you can create the future that you want to live in at the schools, whether that be that you provide breakfast for your fellow students in the morning, so people who don't have a lot of money, they can also go and have breakfast at the schools. But also think of, I read something in The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and he said that if you want people on an island to build a ship, you shouldn't give them tools. You should learn them how to long for the sea. And I think that's maybe also something to do with student organizing. You should make the students long for another way of learning, another way of organizing, and then they will start to involve themselves, because some of the student organization in Denmark, if you tell about them, they can seem quite bureaucratic and, okay, what can you actually do and what can't you do? I think the good way to do it is make a lot of activism out in the places where you are a student, and then people can see, whoa, who's making this kind of activism? Well, that's the student movement, and they're making life for us better at the universities right now and here. So now I want to be part of it, and you can have role models as well, where you can see the student movement being active. And I'm sure you're doing a lot of that. It's not to criticize it; it's just to bring the perspective of student movements in Denmark.
Bueno, pues tenemos que dejarla aquí.
Okay, so we have to wrap up. It has been really exciting. It has been a great pleasure. Thank you very much, Martha, Danielle, Mads. It has been a very inspiring conversation. It has been, I think it's been really useful for everybody, and we should create this environment, this atmosphere, and these paths for this participation to be increasingly common and more standard. We hope that. Thank you very much, and see you very soon. Thank you.